God has a purpose in all of our lives. Welcome to Bible Study Hub. I'm Ann Wiggins, and we are doing our morning devotional 10 minutes or less, Monday through Friday, in the Gospel of John. And we're right in the thick of John chapter 11. I'll be reading from the Legacy Standard Bible, and we will be covering verses 17 to 27 today. And we'll take the first part of that scripture and really delve into it. Just to catch us up, because if you follow along live with us, this is Monday, March 24th, 2025. So we stopped on Friday, and I just want to get our minds back in the game here. So Jesus was summoned by Mary and Martha to come heal their brother Lazarus. He's quite a distance away. He decides not to go so that Lazarus will actually die so that he can raise him from the dead. The problem is, for the people, they don't know what his plan is. They don't understand it. So in their eyes, none of this is making any sense. Why would Jesus leave them just stranded this way? Why would he allow Lazarus to die? And they're right in the thick of absolute shattered grief. So we're picking up, as I said, in verse 17, and I will be reading from the Legacy Standard Bible. So let's get rolling right now. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb for 4 days. 4 days. This is Lazarus he's speaking of. Now, Bethany, the village where Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were living, was near Jerusalem, about 15 stadia away. Think about a mile and a half or so, probably a little bit more than that. And many of the Jews had come to Mary and Martha to console them about their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went out to meet him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Martha then said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." Jesus said unto her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die, ever. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who comes into the world." Remember that Christ is the Greek translation of the Hebrew word Messiah. So she says, "I know that you're the Messiah, the one that we've been waiting for." Well, we're going to take the smaller portion of 17 to 22 today. And let me just give you a very quick insight into Jewish burial practices. They would take the body that had died and very, very quickly get it into a tomb. They didn't wait like we do. They didn't embalm. So usually within 24 hours, that body would be put where it needed to finally rest. They would put spices on it for the smell, and then they would just loosely wrap it. And then they would put it into a cave and set the body out on a shelf and allow it to completely decompose. They put a big stone over the entrance, and then they would take the stone away from time to time, collect the bones that were left. The flesh is completely gone after an amount of time, and they would put it in a box, and they would put it off to the side, and that shelf would be waiting for the next family member. And so they would have family tombs, and you would have a number of boxes of bones in the family tomb, and they would just continue to kind of do this cycle. So that's exactly what was going on here with Mary, Martha, and of course, poor Lazarus, who has died now. What I love about this story is that they're in the house, they're grieving, and somebody notices that off in the distance they see Jesus. And they run up to Martha and they whisper to her, "Jesus is on his way. I just saw him. He's a bit of a ways off, but he's out there." Martha had the opportunity to do one of two things. She could have run to Jesus, or she could have run away from him. And you notice which one she chooses. Even in her disappointment, even in her grief and her sadness, she runs to Jesus. I just lost my grandma, my last living grandma, a couple months ago, back in December. She was, I think, 102, if I'm not mistaken. So probably 8 or 9 years ago, she was visiting me. She's in her 90s at this point. We had a Bible study at my house one night, and she was, of course, there. And I said, "Grandma, tell the girls about your long, long, long life of loving and serving Jesus." And she recounted how when she had 2 babies at home, one 3, one 1, Her husband at that time, this is the 1940s, got polio and almost died. And how incredibly scary it was at that time to have two babies at home, a husband she wasn't sure was going to make it, no income, and how God just took care of them. And I remember saying to her, Grandma, did you ever get tempted when those hard times happened to just say, this is not working for me? God doesn't care. He's not watching over us. Look what he is allowed to have happen to my family. And did you ever think about just walking away? And she's, if you can imagine, if you knew my grandma, you know this. Finger comes out. No. She said, no. If there was ever a time I needed him, it was then. Hey, lots of you, as we said last week, are going through really hard things right now. Loved ones are sick. Finances are tight. A child is wayward. Your own health is deteriorating. Whatever it is, this is not the time to run away from him. Run to him. That's what Martha did in the story. And when she gets to Jesus, she honestly says, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. You know, I think it's just a great example of faith and disappointment, all kind of mixed up together. And she just, as a good friend, talking to a good friend, just says, Lord, I don't understand. If you would just come, if you would just come, you could have healed him and he wouldn't have died. But she follows that up in verse 22 by saying, but even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. What's interesting about this statement is that little word ask is in the Greek, a word that is used when a lower subservient asks something of a higher upper. The word that she uses indicates that what she thought was, Jesus, it feels like whatever you ask God to do for you, like you've got this special inroads. You're a prophet. God answers prayers for you in a way he doesn't for the rest of us. So if you just ask him nicely, I think he'll do it. The thing is, Jesus never used that word when he referred to himself as having asked the Father. There was another word for ask in Greek that was two equals. And that's the word that Jesus always used of himself when he spoke of himself asking the Father. So she's a little off base here, but Jesus is just so gracious. He doesn't chastise her. He doesn't get on her case. He proceeds to just simply go ahead and do the miracle that's coming up. But before he does that, he asks her some very important questions. And those questions are what we're going to cover tomorrow. So I hope you'll join us again. But in conclusion for today, here's what I want you to think about. When Martha was in her darkest moment, she ran to Jesus. What about you? Maybe this whole Bible, Christian, Jesus is all brand new to you and you don't even know exactly. You're just trying to navigate your way through it. I could just encourage you, run to him, not away from him. He does have the answers. He does love you so very much. So much so that he died for you to pay the penalty for your sin. And unlike Lazarus that someone else had to ask to raise, Jesus raised himself from the dead because he is God. He's God, and if you run to him, he will never, ever let you down. Well, thank you for being with us for Bible Study Hub today. We will be back tomorrow morning, Lord willing, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful day.